So welcome to the early access preview of Elden Ring. This area is Limgrave, or the north part of it anyway. This part has been sectioned off for the network test, but it's still absolutely massive, and I'm going to show you my favourite route through this place, but yours will be different.
Oh, yes. Tarnished, are we? Come to the lands between for the Elden Ring, Of course you have.
In the interest of time, I'm going to keep exploring, but I'll continue the NPC dialogue in the background.
But I'm afraid you're plumb out of luck. You are maidenless, a bit player, fully divorced from the strength of runes. Feel free to go off and die in a ditch somewhere.
So that guy's rude as hell, but he ain't wrong. The game has just started, but you should probably be prepared to be put straight in the dirt. Yeah, so if you think you can beat this guy first time, then you're a better player than I am. From Software aren't passing up this opportunity to remind you what kind of game you're playing. Luckily, there's a ruined church nearby, and you're going to see why it's ruined in a minute, because he can't get in there, but he can destroy it. Parts of the environment are destructible now, and it has a gameplay purpose as well, because you can actually get up there after he destroys it. Pretty cool.
You're a tarnished. I can see it. And I can also see that you're not after my throat. Then why not purchase a little something? I am Kale, purveyor of fine goods. You know, if you can spare the runes, you should buy yourself a crafting kit. A crafting kit allows you to make basic items on your own. Essential, really, if you intend to survive out here for any duration. Goodbye. Nice to do business.
So buying the crafting kit from Kale is highly recommended. I'm making some bone knives now from animal bones that I found out in the world, and that's how you craft most of the items that will be familiar to you from Dark Souls, like fire bombs or prism stones. You make these things from the materials that you farm out in the world now. I also just equipped a spirit summon. That's another thing I bought from Kale. Spirit summons are items. They use FP to cast, and they summon spirit helpers. You'll see them soon. So right there, I performed a guard counter. You do this by blocking an attack, then following up with R2. It does a lot of damage. It does a ton of posture damage and allows you to get a critical attack often. Highly recommend getting the hang of that. Okay, another thing I'm getting the hang of is the range of Carrion Piercer, one of the spells that the Sorcerer Knight starts with. Sorcery is strong, it's balanced, I like it. You see that statue on the right? That's a statue of Marika. It's essentially another type of checkpoint. You'll see them in difficult areas. If I was to die in this area coming up here, then I'll spawn back there instantly. One thing that'll help keep you alive is stealth. You click in the L3 button and you can sneak around. It's super important for areas like this because a lot of enemies here will alert nearby enemies and it can get out of hand pretty quickly. I'm making my way to this. This is a map fragment. Very important. The map is just a blur without it, so don't go past without getting this. So there's a reason why you're probably going to want to stealth through this camp. That horn. Most enemies here carry it, and it alerts the entire camp to your presence. It's for situations like this, I think, that spirit summons were designed. These wolves act as a distraction, allowing me to cleave through enemies more effectively. I'm doing some pretty good damage here, but As soon as the wolves die and everyone turns to face you, you kind of realize you're hopelessly outmatched, so spirit summons can also act as a distraction for you to leg it instead. Spirit summons can be very powerful, but remember, you can only summon them in difficult areas. Nearby, these threads of light guide us to our third site of lost grace. This is a really important one to visit.
Greetings, traveller from beyond the fog. I am Melina. I offer you an accord. Have you heard of the Finger Maidens? They serve the two fingers, offering guidance and aid to the tarnished. But you, I am afraid, are maidenless. I can play the role of maiden, turning rune fragments into strength to aid you in your search for the Elden Ring. You need only take me with you to the foot of the Erd Tree. Then it's settled. I bequeath to you this ring. Use it to traverse great distances. It will summon a spectral steed named Torrent. Torrent has chosen you. Treat him with respect.
Now we have our mount, Torrent, who can take us to some points of interest on the map. I just marked 3 beacons. We'll head there now, but first, mounted combat. So I could go on for a really long time about its new mechanics and its new control scheme, but for now, can I just say, I love it. I think it adds so much depth to this game. That was so much fun. My god. So make sure you visit Melina. She also lets you level up.
Share them with me. Your thoughts, your ambitions, the principles you would follow.
This is Groveside Cave. In my opinion, it is perhaps the most important early game location that you can visit. The enemies aren't too difficult, but the rewards you get are insane. This is the first reason we're here, the Twin Blade, my weapon of choice in this network test. You'll see why. So that was a jumping attack. You can do jumping R2s and jumping R1s as well. They are very good for breaking enemy posture and also knocking some enemies out of the air. You can also do running R1s and running R2s. So fire grease is one of the better craftable items I've found. It just requires 2 things. It requires root resin found near trees and smoldering butterflies found near wildfires. It's very good against this Bloodborne-esque boss. So you're probably starting to understand why I like the Twin Blade. Its default weapon art is very strong, and it even stun locks this boss. On the left side of the screen, you can see what weapon art is currently active. The Twin Blade's default art is called Spinning Slash, and it's active because I'm two-handing the weapon. If I was to one-hand it and have my shield in the left hand, I would use my shield's weapon art instead. The Beastman drops the Viridian Amber Medallion, which increases your maximum stamina. But that in the chest is why we're here. The Flask of Wondrous Physic. So let's return to a Site of Grace and check it out. Conveniently, this beam of light will appear at the end of every dungeon, allowing you to easily warp to the surface. Hopefully this frees up a little bit of design space for From Software, allowing them to design deeper dungeons that don't need to loop back around. Anyway, now we have the ability to mix Wondrous Physic at a Site of Lost Grace. Here, you combine tears that you find out in the world to create a potion with custom effects. Now, we only have one of these flasks, but you know the best bit? These replenish when you sit at a Site of Lost Grace, so you'll get a ton of use out of these. Here I'm picking up some ruin fragments. These shards of stone are believed to have once been a part of a temple in the sky. These hollow enemies, digging in the ground and wandering the lands between, are former nobles. According to an item description, they seem to have forgotten what they were searching for, and now wander aimlessly. Elden Ring has this unparalleled gameplay flow to it, where you go seamlessly from the open world into these tightly designed dungeons. This second one we're exploring, the Stormfoot Catacombs, it feels a lot like a Chalice dungeon from Bloodborne. These heavy doors require you to go deeper into the dungeon and unlock them. These dungeons are full of traps and ambushes. You're going to want to keep your shield up, but there's some things that your shield can't really protect you against. The stressful thing is you can hear the enemy chasing me. But the good thing is, I think he gets burnt to a crisp here. We're in this dungeon specifically to find one of my favorite Ashes of War. An Ash of War is essentially a skill that you can assign to your weapon, shield, catalyst, or talisman. The Twin Blade has a really good weapon art, as you can see, but I believe there's one in here that's even better, and it really suits the Sorcerer build. As you can probably expect, every dungeon has a main boss at the end, and sometimes in the middle of it. That last boss looked like it was inspired by Bloodborne, but this one is the nightmare fuel. Oh yeah, so the Flask of Wondrous Physic that we mixed does two things. First, it restores my health, but then it also gets rid of it, because I explode. But the explosion does way more to the enemy than it does to us. So on the left side of the screen, there's a little symbol, looks like a gravestone. This lets you know that you can summon help. And once again, these wolf boys are a very powerful tool. Maybe too powerful, I'm not really sure where I stand on spirit summons yet. Bosses clearly have a lot of AoE attacks now, and some bosses do just obliterate your summons instantly. But the fact remains, if you want to be at your most powerful, it is going to almost always be a good idea to summon your spirits when you can, because they don't cost that much FP, and they distract the boss long enough for you to do a ton of damage. This one didn't even die, it just dodged out of the way all the time. I'll be interested to see how From Software decides to balance these. In my opinion, they should be careful about making these too strong, but hey, that's the Dark Souls formula, right? Like, there's no easy mode, but there are in-game ways to make your character more powerful, and there are in-game ways to find solutions to difficult encounters, and that is the best way to do an easy mode, so they are a cool addition in that regard. So, anyway, what we just got is an Ash of War, which you can designate to a weapon here at the bonfire. They're really interesting. Ashes of War add a different weapon art or skill to your weapon. That's what this one is. It summons 4 homing missiles that stay with you even on horseback. Look at this. This is powerful. Maybe too powerful. You'll see what I mean later on in the video. But the other interesting thing about Ashes of War is that they can also be used to easily assign scaling to your weapon. This Ash of War, the Glint Sword Arc, for example, let me choose between keeping standard scaling or intelligence scaling. Every Ash of War is like this, and the best thing about it is it lets you be more flexible with your build, whereas in Dark Souls you had to go to ndr and smith your weapon appropriately. The worst part is that now your scaling and your ideal scaling might be locked behind a weapon art you don't want to use. Hitting that turtle gave me one of the few frame drops I think I've ever seen while playing this game. I mean, you guys can see for yourselves, it looks and plays great on PlayStation 5. And roaming the open world, man, the amount of content in here is staggering. So many bosses and places and NPCs.
Ah, you must be the new Tarnished. You do well to steer clear of a Gill Lake fledgling. A dragon roosts there, and it's as fearsome as it is majestic.
Mounted combat is really fun, and it's one of the places where I feel like sorcery shines quite well. Specifically because you can target their horse and knock them off that way, and then fight them with the advantage of you being on your horse. But the really fun way to fight is by doing jousts, and you can tell the enemy AI is coded to engage in jousting with you. Because you can charge attacks, the timing aspect is just as important as your reflexes and also your creativity while you fight. You know, different weapons have different timings and different charge attacks, and you can use a variety of spells, some of which knock them off, or you can use a bow and arrow while you ride, and even sleep arrows to put them asleep while they're on horseback and win that way. There's just a lot of flexibility and creativity in the ways you prefer to do combat. This is a carriage that has some really good loot at the back if you can steal it or take out that huge group of enemies, but for now we're going to go to the post-town remains. And this is where the horse's double jump really shines. Sometimes it's surprisingly useful to get on top of a tall structure so that you can see everything that's below you. This lets us see the remains of the town, and it reveals that there is a staircase in a little room that cannot be accessed unless you jump that direction or you jump over these fences. If you were on foot, you might never have found it. Pumpkinhead. He's aptly named, and his head is actually completely immune to damage, which can definitely screw you over, depending on the weapons you're using. He also makes short work of our summons. So you'll see that summons aren't always super useful. One thing it took me a while to remember is that, you know, like Dark Souls, shields are very, very effective. Rolling through everything might get you killed more often than not. Interestingly though, a lot of bosses now inflict a bleed effect, I've noticed, so you can't just rely on hiding behind your shield all the time, or that bleed effect is going to get out of control. Another advantage of two-handing weapons I found is that it deals significantly more posture damage. Posture is now this weird blend of Dark Souls and Sekiro, where it's this invisible meter that you build up, like in Dark Souls, I guess. But unlike Dark Souls, it builds up on them regardless of whether they're blocking. So, for example, any boss that you're hitting is probably taking posture damage, and depending on the weapon you're using and the nature of the attacks you're doing, you might open them up to a critical attack. It doesn't happen against this boss, but it's definitely worth keeping in mind.
Tarnished, are we? No wonder you should turn up here.
This is Sorceress Celine, an NPC who appears here in the network test, but I guess it's unlikely she'll be here in the full game. She sells a few decent sorceries, but the real reason we're here is for that lore, and she tells you some good stuff about glintstone sorceries and how it differs from sorcery in the Souls games.
Our art draws upon the powers embedded in Glintstone. But what is the nature of such power? Glintstone is the amber of the cosmos. Golden amber contains the remnants of ancient life and houses its vitality, while Glintstone contains residual life and thus the vitality of the stars. It should not be forgotten that Glintstone's sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein.
While roaming this way, you might come across the Black Knight guarding the bridge. He only appears here at night time. He's also very difficult, so we'll continue. But we have time to look at this. It's a sort of dung beetle, a sparkling one that gives items, and they can be found all across the lands between.
Oi! You there! Could you help us out,
Make sure you visit that grove of trees when you finally play this game. For us, now though, it's time to breach the Stormgate and head towards Stormvale Castle. Stormvale Castle is the first legacy dungeon in Elden Ring. It blocks your access to the next section of the open world, and it's sort of like a traditional Dark Souls dungeon in the sense that it's this big, tightly designed space where you can't use your horse. Breaking through here can be very difficult if you take the time to fight. And even if you take the time to loot, it can quickly become a really epic chase sequence. There are so many curiosities and points of interest hidden around the place. You'll miss a lot if you just follow the main path. This isn't really an open world like Ghost of Tsushima or The Witcher or Skyrim, where it's a lot of really vast distance for the sake of it feeling vast and making the world feel huge. So far, I'm impressed with how densely populated the area is with intriguing things like these one-eyed snake statues and the Evergaol that they guard. Foolishly, I think I forgot to sit at a grace before I fought Bloodhound Knight Darrowil, and I'm low on Crimson Tears, and I'm very low on FP, and FP is kind of what I'm relying on to do most of my damage with, since I haven't taken the time to upgrade my weapon. Interestingly, this is a boss fight where you can't use spirit summons, so there are going to be boss fights where you can't use that as a crutch. Not that I could summon them, anyway, with no FP. Feeling a bit desperate, I decide to play this really, really defensively, seeing as I have basically no health left, but he is doing only physical damage. The thing I forget is that he's also doing bleeding damage. Of course, when you die, your runes are left behind at your point of death. They even show up on the compass, which helps you to find your way back to them. Ours are in the Evergaol, with the Bloodhound. I wonder why he's locked away in here. Luckily, we can choose to respawn at a statue of Marika. At first I thought I would be against these, but when you realize how vast the open world is and how tedious it would be to ride back to everything, they are a nice convenience to have sometimes. This time we go in with full FP, and I can show you why Glintstone Arch is such a good weapon art. Yeah, so, weapon arts, or skills, or ashes of war. Whatever you call them, they're powerful, especially the magical ones, and especially when you consider that they get more powerful when you upgrade your weapon, and I haven't upgraded my weapon yet. You can get weapons to +3 in this beta. Weapon arts need to be powerful if they're going to be used by players. I feel like a lot of the weapon arts in Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro just weren't used because they weren't powerful. It's a difficult line for From Software to walk. If I had to give one recommendation, it's that weapon arts should cost a lot more FP. That way they're still powerful and people will use them, but there is a drawback. Right now, why would I use sorcery or faith if a weapon art can do the same thing? And a weapon art doesn't even require me to invest stats into it necessarily. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. According to the Elden Ring Twitter, long ago, in the time before the Shattering, wolves dared not roam the lands between. Now, they're everywhere, apparently appearing out of gusts of wind. There is a lot of lore in the network test, but the thing is, I think enemy drops have been tweaked so that they don't drop, their related items and weapons and equipment. So there is a lot of lore in the network test in the items, but getting lore for a specific enemy has proven quite difficult. You might have noticed now sitting at this grace, there's a new option that says About Grace. With this, you can ask Melina a little bit more about graces, and sometimes a little bit more about herself.
Me? I'm searching for my purpose, given to me by my mother inside the Erd Tree, long ago, for the reason that I yet live, burned and bodiless. There is something for which I must apologize. I've acted the Finger Maiden, yet can offer no guidance. I am no maiden. My purpose was long ago lost.
We're nearing the end of Elden Ring's first open world and the start of its legacy dungeon. Marking this transition is our first mandatory boss. The difficulty of this boss is what drove me to create such a powerful character this time.
Foul tarnished. In search of the Elden Ring. Emboldened by the flame of ambition. Someone must extinguish thy flame. Let it be Margitt the Fell.
Margitt the Fell is tough. He has a lot of attacks that come out at a moment's notice and a lot of gap closers that can catch you while you're trying to heal. When I finally beat him for the first time, it was with a way weaker greatsword build and no summons. The only way I could manage it was by delaying his second phase as much as possible and making sure I broke his posture within it. Have a look.
Thou art of passing skill. Warrior blood must be running thy veins. Tarnished. Smouldering with thy meager flame, cower in fear of the night. The hands of the fell Omen shall brook thee no quarter.
That's the end of this first preview, but there's a lot more Elden Ring content to come, so subscribe for that. But beyond that, there's a lot more content in this test that we weren't allowed to access, so that's something to get truly excited about. Thank you to From Software and Namco for helping me get access to this, and thank you for watching.